For edge rusher, you chose Denver Broncos edge rusher Nik Bonitto, who, sort of a pass rush specialist type, but man, he has been on fire. If you look at his whole season, he has earned a 76.3 pass rushing grade for the Broncos this year. But if you look at his performance just since week 7, so week 7 through week 14, 85.3 pass rush grade. He's got 7.5 sacks. He's got a 17% pass rush win percentage. He's got 31 pressures. This is a player who I find myself constantly using as a comp when I'm doing scouting for a lot of these smaller pass rush specialist type of defensive linemen at the college level who are very, very successful. And there's normally 2 or 3 every year that are sort of built like Nik Bonitto, a little bit smaller. You have a specialized role for him, but very clearly, in Denver's defense, what we're seeing right now, valuable. I mean, when you're able to get after the passer the way that Nik Bonitto is, that holds a ton of value, especially from what we have seen from him over the last 7 weeks when it comes to just that success basically everywhere doing pass rushing. So your thoughts on Nik Bonitto? Let's hear about it. One of your most underrated players here on the defensive line.
Yeah, and I don't think it can be overstated what you said in terms of kind of the league-long splits, right? You mentioned the early portion of the season there. In those first 6 weeks, he had 16 pressures, but 7 of those were unblocked scheme, Vance Joseph creative pressures, or cleanup pressures. What he's done since is all on him. It's me. There's no scheme help. There's no cleanup coverage stuff. It's me. And the pressure rate would put him 3rd in the NFL across a season of guys who have 100 snaps. That is A+ tier 1 of 1, right? Type production. You're talking Hutchinson levels of production from a guy who is a pure speed bend type flyer off the edge. To your point, when we watch these guys coming out of college, you say, well, yeah, he's explosive. He gets the ball quicker than a guy playing, in the ACC at tackle. Maybe he's a 6th, 7th round pick. It's how often are you going to beat someone at that stance at the NFL level? These guys are unbelievable athletes. They're quicker off the ball than you are, and they know the snap count. So you might be in trouble. There's no hand claps, right? These guys are shouting. You got to figure the thing out. It's hard to time up. And it also coincides with him moving from the left side of the line to the right side of the line. So now he's going up against right tackles. That change in the production when he starts taking off as his own guy, having crazy production without scheme help, goes from him moving from the left side of the defense to the right side, facing great left tackles. And in those sacks you mentioned, 6 of the sacks after week 7 have come against a double team or chip. So this is not just a guy based on profile with the speed and burst off the ball, ripping off the line of scrimmage. Guys can't get out of their feet, right? Feet aren't clean, and he bends around closer to the quarterback and wins. He is breaking through doubles. He is spiking back inside. There's some spin moves now. And the thing I love about him, and what I think I'm going to take into this offseason evaluating the college guys, just tell me who has the best radar. And not just the best radar in terms of getting up the field and bending and cutting the arc down, right? You can see that really quickly. Those guys go in the first round. I get that. But the guys who can't do that and then have to work back inside, how many guys get stuck at the top and get run around the arc effortlessly because they don't have the tenacity, the fight, the strength at the top, the redirection skills to close back inside? And how many guys can just stop on a dime, right parallel level to the quarterback, and disengage quickly and accelerate off contact? And that to me is the difference in Bonitto this year. Some of the numbers were decent last year, right? They were pretty solid numbers, but the overall play wasn't that great. The difference for me this year is just the nuance, the different ways he's winning, and his ability now to get level to a quarterback, disengage, and accelerate off contact, which just was not there in college and was not there early in the pros. It was purely I either win off the line and on my angle, or I don't win at all.
So that sort of brings me into my next question about evaluation. When you watch these players coming from college to the NFL, how much leeway do you give these smaller pass rush specialist players? Is it something where it's man, you almost want to take a chance on all of these guys because you've seen this production at the college level, or are you more strict about it? Would you say, hey, what Nik Bonitto is doing this year, not something that you can expect every single season? Because there's a lot of, you go back to sort of the Bill Parcells saying, where Parcells says, well, the NFL can only deal with what the college game sends them. So if edge rushers are getting a lot smaller at the college level because the game is trying to get a lot faster, and I feel like we're seeing a lot more of that lately, I feel like there are these small pass rush specialist type of rushers that we're seeing in every single class now. Are you willing to give those guys a chance, or are you still saying hey, there's a pretty high bar if you're a specialist? I'm not just giving all of these guys a chance. It's not like all of them can work out. You have to be sort of a special player in that regard to really work out? Or do you think the schemes are good enough to where you mentioned all the unblocked pressures, you just need a guy who can get from point A to point B really quickly on the defensive line? Do you think there's going to be more of that?
Yeah, I think it's majorly scheme dependent, right? If you're on those mugged front teams, you need the speed off the ball. The shock factor is everything. So then I'd be more hyped to take it. These players are always, for me, those ones where I end up getting excited and hyped about them, where I start moving them up my personal board the closer we get to the draft after being kind of technically disappointed and marking them down earlier on. But if I was with a team, I'd be like, those guys are not for us. And we'll just, shake the hand of everyone who takes these guys. And the two of them are successful, we'll say, good luck to them. Good job by you guys. I need the power. I need the mass. I want to be able to crush the pocket from outside to in. The speed bend guys don't do it for me unless it is that I have Flores, Vance Joseph, Mike McDonald, a true mugged up defense where I want to be able to move guys and bounce them around the front a whole bunch of different ways. I think what's interesting about Bonitto is he's just become a more multifaceted rusher anyway. You would never have been able to see that in college. It's one of those guys where you mentioned the game getting smaller. A lot of these guys are playing in overhang slots, right? What's the difference between some of these guys and Quay Walker if they're stood in an overhang position? It's like, well, is he a coverage off-ball backer for us? Is he going to be a pass rush specialist for us because they use him like that on passing downs? It is so tricky now to figure out, even in your initial eval, which reps to take for which position you want them to play if they're playing on these tight base fronts in college where there's 3 down linemen and sometimes they're a true off-ball linebacker and sometimes they're a get after it pass rusher on late passing down. So it's a really, really dicey one. I would just always default to, can I find Trey Hendrickson? Is there any Trey Hendricksons rolling around out there? I'll take a chance on 3 or 4 of those guys. Hope for my best. They'll at least be impactful because there's just the size. And the small guys, we've seen how many of these guys, Trev, they get to week 2 of the season and the team's like, yep, no, can't get on the field. Doesn't matter. The speed isn't good enough. The size isn't good enough to get washed out in the run game. Can't play them.
Yeah, it is tough. There is a physical prerequisite, it feels like, for a lot of these players. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit lower on Nik Bonitto when he was coming out of Oklahoma because of that reason. I was going much more towards that there is a physical prerequisite and a mass prerequisite that you have to play at the pro level. And I felt like Nik Bonitto could give you some solid reps, but you talked about the development I think is really important for them. You mentioned an overhang defender. Before we move on to the last position that I want to get to, explain that overhang defender term, because you're talking about like different types of linebackers, and I'm following you plenty, but overhang defender I think is one of those terms that like sometimes they'll read like, okay, overhang defender, an apex defender. They're like, okay, what is this? What are we talking about here?
Oh, yeah, we get to apex cover downs. Your head starts spinning. Mine too.
Right,
Everyone's got different terminology for just saying linebacker.
Don't even get me started with money backer, which I feel like can mean something different for like every team at the college level.
Money backer, a way to sell coaching courses in the clinic off season. Let me tell you, that's what that is. That's just a safety. That's what that is. The overhang defender is just someone who aligns between the slot and what would normally be like a detached tight end. And again, that's difficult. So between the slot receiver, detached tight end, and the tackle. A guy who stands in that little corridor there rather than over or outside the shoulder of a tackle or over or outside the shoulder of a slot receiver, detached tight end, something like that. So someone who just sits in that corridor between the two positions, that's your overhang defender. He's overhanging the tackle.
So you got to have, and I mean, when you play in that position and with that much space, you have to have a very versatile skill set. You mentioned, okay, a guy like Nik Bonitto or a guy like Quay Walker, these are kind of like different types of players, right? These are off-ball linebacker types or more like on-ball production type of players. And so it is just one of those ways where not every scheme can play this type of a player. You almost have to have like a specialized player that you feel good about to put in this alignment. It's not like, all right, we got a big guy, you're playing the 3-tech or like a 1-tech or something like that. Not every team, even if you're a defensive coordinator who loves to incorporate an overhang defender type of a player, if you don't have the right guy to run it, I think you're going to be in trouble because the roles that they have to play are very difficult. But I just wanted you to explain that for the people, and obviously you did a good job doing it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below. So if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.